Over the next hour, you're going to have the exciting opportunity to hear from two individuals who are closely and deeply connected with civic engagement, are passionate about voting rights, representation, and encouraging young people to get involved in their communities. I have a few questions ready to start us off, but also want to make sure that we have time for audience questions at the end. So please make sure to use the chat and post your questions for the speakers throughout the event. I'll do my best to address them during the Q&A session. All right, and now it's time to welcome our speakers. Today we have Julie Wise, King County Director of Elections, as well as Alicia Crank, Executive Director of Seattle City Club. Julie and Alicia, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate you sharing your time and space with us. Would love to start off with each of you introducing yourselves and sharing how you got involved with civic engagement. We can start off with Alicia. Or
Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Crank. I am the Executive Director of Seattle City Club, which is a now 44-year-old organization that focuses on civic engagement and civil discourse. I've been in this role for just about 2 years. My whole kind of background. Oh, someone's coming in. So my whole background has kind of always been around civic engagement and community building, whether I was in corporate America, in institutional banking and education, and now in nonprofit. One of the things that's keeping us really busy right now is our debate coalition. So we have been super, super busy with that. And we held two last week with Seattle City Council and the Washington AG's race. And actually tomorrow night in Edmonds, we're doing the OSPI debate, which will also be televised and broadcast. So I am excited for this, and this is just so timely.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Julie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. My name is Julie Wise, and I am the elected Director of Elections for King County. I have the great privilege of working with about 72 full-time employees and hundreds of temporary employees that we hire to conduct 4 to 6 elections, serving 1.4 million registered voters in 190 jurisdictions. I fell madly in love and turned into a huge election geek 24 years ago when I first started at King County Elections. They were hiring temporary staff in the phone bank to answer questions from voters. And back then, you had to go to your specific polling place out of 500 in order to have your ballot counted. And I immediately thought, we could do better. This is redunculous. And I never left. I've been there for 24 years. I've worked in every single position from GIS, Geographical Information Services, to verifying signatures, to entering voter registrations. I love the work. And I believe that democracy is at its finest when all voices are heard. And I love my jam is removing barriers to increase access, to get 100% turnout, and keeping elections secure at the same time. So excited to be here with you all tonight.
Yes, thank you so much. Really appreciate you all sharing some of your background and what inspired you to get into this work. It's always really interesting to hear what brings people to want to get engaged. I'd love to hear more about how you all feel about the importance of voting, as well as some of the barriers that come and show up in the way of people participating both in local and national elections.
That is a meaty question, and there's so many ways you can start that off. And I would say probably the importance for me is the fact that, we look at the fact that not, if we go back to Independence Day, right? Not everyone was free, for Independence Day. And then even when voting rights came through, and when women were finally able to vote, it wasn't all women, So there's always kind of been this progression of how do we get everybody the same rights as the average male did, back in the day. And I think now as things get more diverse and, we really need younger people who probably feel disenchanted and disenfranchised, maybe with some of the rhetoric that's been happening in local and national politics over the past few years. I've really just kind of made it my mission to kind of focus really on Gen Z and say, we really need you guys to be out there. And I know that it's disheartening. I know that there's a lot of negative information out there and not a lot of positivity, but hopefully that folk can take that challenge up to say, okay, we're going to change the narrative, we're going to change the tone. And even this year, this is a huge election year across the board, whether it's national, state, regional, local. There's a lot of really huge roles that are going to be taken by a new person. And so also that's why voter education and voter engagement is so important to me, because these are some really big decisions that are going to be made. And I don't think on a holistic level, people realize that. Um, and really looking at that local level as well. So that's kind of where I am with it. And I learned a ton from Julie earlier this month when we had our civic cocktail around elections. And I'm gonna tell you right now, her energy is real and it's what's the word I'm looking for? Contagious. And talking about this work and how important it is and removing those barriers. So I think between people like all of us trying to, do civic engagement and get more people out there to vote and to care about it, combined with what Julie and her team are doing with removing some of those barriers, I think we have a really great opportunity to take those numbers up.
Alicia covered it so beautifully. I think about barriers and I think about meeting voters where they're at.
Yes.
Government has done such a bang up job of just making things unnecessarily complicated, using legalese and language that's not accessible, right? And so I think about meeting where voters are at in the sense of language and
Mhm.
access. Um, and some of the things that we've done at King County Elections is we provide election materials in 7 languages. So ballots, our website, and we've also, I was the first county in the state to add prepaid postage to our return ballot envelopes, right? Like, it's just like, it's things like that. It's just like, people don't have a stamp. And folks were just like, what do you mean people don't have a stamp? I'm like, people don't have stamps. Like, and if you make that a barrier, that feels so unlike democracy, right? So we've added drop boxes. We have 85 drop boxes today. When I first got elected, we had 15. And so it's about these ways of really making elections more accessible to folks. And that's what I get like really excited about. So last year we rolled out ballot alerts. So now you can get text and email notifications to know exactly where your ballot is at in the process. Um, you have an online signature cure. So if you have a signature issue with your ballot, because we compare every signature on your return envelope, now you can do that online starting last year. It's little things like this. It's really like, let's get this bureaucracy and governmenty stuff out of the way and let people have access to their right, which is to have their voice heard. And so I really, that's like, I could speak about this for hours, but I think it's really about meeting where voters where they're at. And and I think we have more work to do on it.
Yeah. And Julie, if I could piggyback off of you, I think the word that resonated with me the most, and you said it, was, accessibility. And I think that's really key to this as well. And there's been all this back and forth talk about, bring back in-person voting and people should have to stand in line, and all these other things. It's like, it's not about voter fraud, it's about accessibility. And as someone who now can appreciate that more, as someone who developed a disability over the past few years, I'm like, oh yeah, it is a lot nice to be able to know that I can get this early, I can mail it in, and it's done, and not have to worry about physically being able to get somewhere or making sure that someone else can as well. So I think,
Absolutely. And that's why we have, and we do have vote centers, right? In King County, and folks should know we have vote centers. We, again, are all about however you want to show up. If that's accessing your ballot online, printing it out and putting it into a Dropbox or into the mail, if that's using the one that was mailed to you or going to a vote center, when this, Alicia, you hit on like such a point that just is absolutely mind-boggling to me. How is it that in this country, you can't decide how you want your ballot?
right.
If I want my ballot mailed to me, And if I want to have ballot drop boxes, I can't believe that we're still arguing over that in 2024.
Yeah.
Meet the voters where they're at. And if they want it mailed to them, they're grown adults.
Yeah.
They should be able to have that. That's just bonkers to me. Or limiting drop boxes, it's just absurd.
Yes, it is so wild to see the barriers that people put in place for something that should be is a constitutional right for all of us to be able to participate in. I'm originally from North Carolina. I moved to this area about 5 years ago and was blown away with how much more accessible voting was. It was so hard for me to vote as someone who wanted to be civically engaged, was involved. And I went to the wrong polling centers multiple times just because I had moved. I was in college.
Yeah.
Had to spend hours trying to figure out the system. This should be a lot easier and more accessible. So it was been really exciting to experience that here.
And
Just
I'll
how
tell
much
you this,
easier it is to be involved and really make your voice heard.
I'll tell you this, I grew up in Michigan, so yeah, I did have to walk across and do that. And then when I lived in California, it was a mail-in ballot state already, when I got there. One of the things that they did do that I'm glad is starting to happen here, I love the I voted sticker. And that would come
Yes.
all of the ballots that were mailed to us in California. So when I got up here, I was like, I want my I voted sticker. And that's why I would go to the ballot, I would go to the drop box because I knew that's where I could get it. But I'm glad that it's starting to happen now that it's starting to be mailed out with the ballot itself. It sounds like it's something that's so small and inconsequential, but it's not. It really is something that kind of, brings people together in a moment to go, hey,
It's woven into our democracy, an I voted sticker. And I've been hearing about it for 15 years since we moved from polling places to vote by mail. And you're right, this last election was the first election that King County officially brought back the I voted sticker. So it's in that piece of paper that's wrapped around your ballot in King County. I think it's gorgeous. It's beautiful, the landscape that our graphic designer created. But it's more than just a sticker. It
it is.
really creates this sort of besides just like free advertising that you're not paying for on TV or a billboard, it really creates this sort of social pressure and reminder to folks like, hey, it's time to vote. Get out and make your voice heard. And yeah, I'm really, really excited. You will see the I voted sticker again this election.
Yes, that's been such one of my favorite changes. I love it. I have it put up on my bulletin board and plan to keep it. But as we talk about access and increasing access and making voting easier for folks, you hear at the same time folks being concerned about election integrity and the security of our ballots and our elections. Could you both talk a little bit about what election integrity means to you, especially in the lens of access and increased access?
Julie, go for it. I'll piggyback off of you.
Absolutely. I mean, election integrity to me really is about free, fair, and secure elections. And when we talk about all these things about removing barriers, I don't do that lightly. It's all with at the same time ensuring that it's secure. And what I think we're proving here in King County, with an 87% turnout in our last presidential, which is some of the highest in the entire country, if not world, is you can have both. It can be accessible and secure. So don't tell me otherwise. But when we talk about election security, it has become it's been raising in volume in the last 4 to 6 years, right, around election integrity. Understandably so, when we hear folks from all levels of elected government sowing doubts into our elections.
Yeah.
And I totally get it, right? It's behind the curtain. What happens to your ballot? You put it into a mailbox, you put it into a drop box. And so we're really trying to embrace, radical transparency is our mission at King County elections. Let's pull away the curtains and really show what's happening so that people can buy into the election process and really understand it. So some of the ways in which we've been doing that is we have web cameras across our whole entire facility. You can watch us processing ballots from the comfort of your home. You can go into the King County Elections facility. It is a public facility. It is your facility. There is a fifth of a mile, literally transparent loop. It is plexiglass, and you can watch elections at work. You can see ballots processing. We don't have anything to hide. We have hundreds of observers representing nonpartisan. If you're interested in that, the League of Women Voters organizes volunteers to observe through that program, and of course, the Democratic and Republican Party. And we get a lot of observers in there as well to watch that process. And so I think it's really important that people um, know that there's integrity to an election, but that's one thing for me just to sit here and say, there is, trust me. It's safe, it's secure. People need to see it and people need to buy into it. And I think we need to do a better job of, again, really pulling back the curtains. One of the things in 2020, we provided what I heard from national media was the most robust access to our elections facility than any other jurisdiction in the entire country. So anytime I would open any news app in the 2020 presidential cycle, there would always be a King County elections equipment or ballot, regardless if it was good news or bad news. But part of that, again, is really making sure that people have access to each of those processes and steps. I'd also say we gave hundreds of tours. We have already given hundreds of tours. It is my favorite thing to do. So if folks want to come by and get a tour, I would love to do that and love to show you around the elections facility and each of those steps. I could also talk about hundreds of ways in which we're securing elections, how the drop boxes weigh 1,000 pounds and they're 8-inch bolts cemented into the ground, and how they're specifically designed for vote by mail and they have no external bolts or seals. I could get into the geeky and the weeds things about how our tabulation system is not connected to the internet in any way whatsoever. It is completely air gapped. So there's a lot of components in that and those regards as well. We've got a lot of information on social media, KC Elections. Please follow us, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Threads, and of course on our website as well. I think some pretty good videos too that talk about the process.
And I would say the lead up to everything that Julie said too is part of election integrity and security, because you want to feel like you're being welcome to participate in the process. And when you have marginalized groups not feeling like they're warranted or that their vote is going to matter or that it is even wanted, is a problem in and of itself. So you can have all the transparency stuff if a group that I belong to in some level of intersectionality doesn't feel like they're part of the process or that they're being invited to be part of the process. I think younger people feel like that. I hate saying it now that I'm 50. I'm like, I'm still young. But I think that there's groups that just feel like, okay, you get online and you on Twitter, I refuse to call it the other thing, but you get on Twitter, you get on Facebook, you get on all these other social media platforms, and you see where there's candidates and politicians and whoever are alienating certain groups when they're talking about what their priorities are. And so it's like, okay, well, if this person is getting all of this attention and strength from saying that, is my vote really going to matter? Is it just going into vapor? And so I think being able to change the narrative around the fact that, hey, we need to make sure that everyone feels like their vote counts. It doesn't matter their skin color, it doesn't matter their race, it doesn't matter their gender, it doesn't matter their socioeconomic background, is that everyone's counts equally. And I think we have a long way to go with that. I think King County, and I think honestly Washington State in general, is doing a decent job in that, but there's definitely other states that are very far behind. I thought about what you said out in North Carolina, and we get here and we're mailing our ballots and we're filling them out at home and we're getting ready to hand it back over. But then you see long lines of people in other states where you hear, and I remember this from when I was a teenager and going, how is it that certain states have moved forward and progressed in this area where there are others that are still so far behind? And I don't think it's an accident that a lot of those communities that are far behind are in marginalized areas. I don't see that line in Beverly Hills. I don't see that line in the Hamptons. Man, why is it only that it seems to happen in certain areas? And I think those are uncomfortable conversations and questions that we don't have or that we're not having that are starting to happen. And I hope that under new leadership and administration, that can really be called out, because if that part doesn't get fixed, then all the work that Julie and her folks are doing and other people like her isn't going to make that much of a difference.
Absolutely. That trust piece is so critical. It really reminds me of was just a couple of years ago in North Carolina, where I'm from, specifically was implementing policies that were found out to be targeting specific groups of people with, quote, surgical precision, and were eventually repealed because of that. But it really is so different from state to state. And I remember one thing that I specifically was blown away by realistically when I moved here, which is the access for information. So for me, when I was first going to vote, the experience that I had standing in line, but also within like a certain distance of the polling place, you're getting bombarded with specific information, and they're all party specific. They're all specific to these specific groups that are funded by who knows who. And in King County, we receive a King County voter pamphlet that's got information from all of the candidates. We receive a lot of information that really is bipartisan. It's not due to, or you're not receiving just what you're handed in a line. So really thinking about everything that we've got on the docket this year. There's a lot of attention on national level with the presidential campaign. Locally, we have a lot going on. To you all and in your work, what are some of the most important issues and ballot measures that you think that this audience especially should be aware of?
Oh gosh, all of the above. I think in Washington State, especially, you have three initiatives that made it to the ballot where I still think there's not a lot of people that understand what they are. And that, does yes mean yes or does yes mean no to to what it is? Because a lot of these are already existing. So which is why, again, I think, at City Club, one of the things I really wanted to focus on last year and this year and during those debates was getting into the neighborhoods of the people and, having people who had never participated or attended a debate ever because of childcare, of work, or whatever is outside their community, to be able to say, you need to be in here to hear what's being said and be able to ask the questions you want to ask directly to the people that are involved. So I think the overarching thing for me is that voter education piece. And one of the things that we did at City Club is, like I said, we did two already. We have one tomorrow, but the video we made sure that we had media partners that are broadcasting and live streaming and recording, so they're still available there. I even ended up doing a podcast called Civically Speaking, where I wanted to talk to not only just civic leaders, but some of the candidates that are running for office. And it was very much in an interpersonal way. Like I wanted to be able to experience the person behind the candidates. I think that gets lost a lot. And I've gotten a little criticism about it, but I'll take it because I think that's one of the reasons why civil discourse is at an all-time low. We forget or don't have started to not care that there is a person behind who you're talking about, whether you're going after the politician slash candidate or you're going after the constituent and saying things that are, harmful to your next door neighbor or community member. So I think getting back to your original question is that I think a lot of stuff is on those initiatives are seriously something that people need to sit down and really read through and understand, what yes means versus what no means for this and what is the long-term effect, especially with 2117.
I'm really thankful that in Washington State, although it just passed a couple of years ago, that voter pamphlets are required to be mailed to every single household in Washington State. King County has done it for decades, but there was only 7 other counties that were providing that. And I think that's an important key information for voters, especially with the explanatory statement that is provided for some of those ballot measures. It gets me on a little bit of a sidetrack of one of my legislative dreams is plain language ballot measures. Oh my gosh, you shouldn't have to be an attorney to be able to decipher what approved or rejected means. Um, but I it might seem weird for me to say this. I think every single issue on the ballot is important. Again, we saw 87% turnout in our presidential election last year. I think we'll see above 80% in King County this year again. What I think is critically important is specifically the local issues. that really do impact your day-to-day life. And we see in these local elections 30–40% turnout. So there's going to be some local issue on people's ballots that are really critically important. City of Seattle, Des Moines, just to name a few that are going to have positions that are going to be on that ballot, and then ballot measures themselves. But totally agree with Alicia as well. The initiatives are really important, and they're confusing. And convoluted. And so it's going to take some time, I think, for folks to be able to look in the voters pamphlet. Again, it does have some good information with the explanatory statement and then the pro and con committees to kind of see how people argue or debate that. I find that to be helpful. And I'm so appreciative to organizations, of course, and all the work that folks like Alicia does to really get in front of voters the debate of these topics and these candidates and these issues, because that to me is much more helpful in making my determination than reading, newsprint of a ballot measure.
And if I can offer homework, and I hate to even say that it's homework, but it really is. I say if you have the time and the bandwidth, also look at what's happening in your neighboring communities, not just like I'm in Snohomish County, for example, but I work primarily in King County, but there's still some overlap. Whatever happens in one county is going to, affect another county one way or the other. And I think now that we're kind of in this hybrid remote world where we're kind of living with a foot in two different places, that it's even more important to know, okay, this is what's happening in my home area, but how does this impact also my work area or my kids' school area? Because again, there's silos, but there really isn't. And if we're able to make sure that we're saying, okay, I see what's happening over in Eastern Washington, and I know that we're totally different mindset over here, but again, people move, you know, and with them, their thoughts and opinions on things. So I would say also, like I pay attention to Snohomish County, King County, Pierce County, Island County, because they're all surrounded by where I live and where I work. And whatever happens in those communities can affect what it is that we do, personally or professionally.
Great
That's
point.
such a great call out. Go ahead, Julie.
No, I was just agreeing. That's a great point.
Such a great point. I also, in addition to being on the board for the Young Nonprofit Professionals Network, do work with the City of Seattle LGBTQ Commission. And this year we led our pride flag raising as we typically do, but we saw cities right around us, so close to Seattle, that refused to do that this year. And it really is such a warning sign for what could be to come, what different
That
mindset
happened in
shifts
Edmond.
are happening. So it is very real. It's such a great point.
Yeah, it happened in Edmonds the previous year under previous mayor. Yes, they had the flag out. It was out the entire month. Then we had new administration, and so they said, "No, we're not going to put it out." But it took the people, it took the residents in this city. They went and got colored chalk, and they drew the flag in front of City Hall. And even though it was towards the end of the month, they did finally put it out there. So again, I think there's something to be said about, again, paying attention to what's happening around you, but also knowing that you have the power as a constituent and as a constituency group to enforce change, even if it's temporary.
Absolutely. Yes, there is power in people and community for sure. With that too, I think this is a great time to revisit the Minty poll that was shared earlier. Thank you for sharing that screen with us. If you haven't responded to this yet, you can still respond. There's a link and a code on your screen. So we've got a word cloud here of issues that are top of mind for folks this election season. Things that I'm seeing a lot of here, lots of civil rights, LGBTQ rights, women's rights, equity, DEI initiatives. Julia, Alicia, do you have any reactions to what you're seeing here? Did these surprise you? Yeah, just would love to hear your thoughts.
Tracks. Completely tracks, especially with women's rights right in the middle, along with housing costs. Military conflicts, absolutely. So now there's nothing on here that surprises me. I think if I had to call it a surprise, if anything, I would say um, Native rights. I think it's something that's talked about, but not really talked about in a very loud voice. And I think that's slowly starting to change, which makes me happy. So I'm glad to have seen that someone put that there.
Sure. Julie, do you have any thoughts?
I gotta be honest, folks. I'm just all election on the brain. We've got. I'm always interested if people are going to say about elections and election rights and election laws, because it kind of gets me going on the idea of that we really do need to have some election reforms across this country and some consistency across this country. We haven't seen major national voting rights change since 1965. Feels like there's time for an update there, right? So. I think that that's top of my mind, and I think that the issues definitely, as Alicia said, tracks. Also, thinking about getting my team through this election cycle. There's been threats to election administrators and concerned about what happens not only before the election and the lead up to it, but also what happens after election day. And so that's really heavily on my brain. And being so nonpartisan as an election administrator, I try to still steer clear of too much opinions on what tracks in this territory.
But that goes back to what I was saying earlier, just about trying to humanize people in civil discourse, right? Because like I don't think people think about that. They don't think, oh my God, there are real people that work for you and are doing this work and are hearing this rhetoric and hearing these things, these negative things being said. And we already know that there are people out there that will act on, these threats for, one reason or another. So I'm hoping that again, people can start thinking about the fact that there is a person behind the things that you are saying. When you're talking about, women's reproductive rights or the lack thereof, there is a person that that's behind that when you say something one way or the other. And so an election employee should not feel like their life is in danger for doing this constitutional right. What are we doing?
Absolutely. I think that leads really well to one of my next questions too. Like in this really heated political climate, there's been so many tensions that are rising, friends, families, coworkers, really all of the spaces that we share with other folks, and they do very much so take a toll, on relationships, mental health, and just well-being. What's your advice, for attendees on handling the stress of election season? How are both of you kind of navigating this space yourself?
Such a great, fabulous question. My role as the director of elections has really changed the last 4 years when we went into, of course, a global pandemic, and then to really having election administrators being attacked at a national level. It's really changed the landscape of sort of my work, and it's really been important and key to keep my team physically safe, but also their mental health. And we've got some really incredible programs. I feel really fortunate as an employee at King County government of making life easier and employee assistance programs, where, we're able to get counseling services to be able to help us get through these times. And we've brought in a lot of folks to help as well, have these hard conversations. When you're receiving an envelope that has fentanyl in it saying that they want you to stop running elections, when they're literally breaking down your door, right? I mean, it's all sorts of it's a really surreal time. And so we tried to humanize that for folks, as Alicia said, that, we're in line at the grocery store with you, we're your neighbors, or we're serving on PTA, we're, daughters and aunts, and just really trying to humanize election administrators. It certainly does take a toll. And so I share very candidly with my team that, I go to counseling, I meditate every single day. I personally live a sober lifestyle that just helps me with my depression and anxiety, and just being very clear and candid about how I take care of myself, and trying to get physical activity. Got myself a dog, a puppy. Um, and things like that, and just being really candid and really honest with my team about that. We all deal with those in certain ways, and being very open about getting help and seeking help for processing our feelings and our emotions. We call ourselves the elections family. We really do lean on each other, and it's a beautiful place. I wouldn't be there for 24 years. If I laugh every day, of course you can imagine it attracts the most amazing people who love their community. They just are so passionate about their community. They just want everyone to vote and have their voices heard. They don't care how you vote. I know it seems ridiculous, but we're being accused of committing felonies, right? Like throwing people's ballots away and changing people's votes. And like, we're not doing that. We have integrity. All we do is care about the people in our community, and again, want their voices to be heard. So, it's definitely been a changing landscape as an election administrator, and I've seen friends across this country a mass exodus. Right, we saw 36% of election administrators leave the field. I have a friend who was the director of elections for Washington State. Her name and address and pictures of her home and her family were put onto the website. Her face in the crosshair of a gun site, and she had to live in a hotel for a month during Christmas last year, right? I mean, she has a child. It's really quite bizarre that the FBI meets with me monthly to talk about that. The new thing is to do swatting, so where they call so that the police show up to my house, thinking that there's an event happening. It's just quite a bizarre way. But it also has riled us up. When we got that letter with fentanyl in it, and we had to sit in the parking lot for 3 hours where hazmat cleaned the building, not a single one of us left. And as soon as hazmat cleared the building, we were marched right back in, and we continued processing ballots, and we posted results that night. It actually did the opposite. It was like, oh yeah, well, watch us. Like, we just are fired up. We're dedicated to the cause. We're dedicated to our community. We love the people, and I've rambled enough. So.
You did not ramble. But I would say, something I've been embracing personally and trying to share with other people is what you said about self-care. And I said self-care is the best level of selfishness you can give yourself. And it's okay. And that self-care includes knowing what it is that you're willing to take in and what you're not. And I read this book many moons ago called Boundaries. And it's kind of religious based, but not really. But there's one lesson in there that talks about, putting up a fence versus a gate. And you put up a fence, everything stays out. But when you have a gate, you have the little door where you can determine what you want to let in and what you want to leave out. And so I try to look at these conversations, any kind of tough conversation, with that gate analogy. What is it that I am willing to let in as part of this conversation, and what will I keep out? And if I know that there's way too much that needs to be kept out, I just leave the situation. I don't engage in that conversation. But if you are someone that is bringing up something political on some level, I think the best thing that a person can do is to go into it with an open mind and go into it being willing to take new information. That doesn't mean that new information changes your mind. But I think if you go into a conversation where you're already closed off, you're like, there's nothing you can possibly say, do, act, whatever, that's going to change my stance on something. I'm only asking you a question so I can start an argument. It's never going to be productive. So you can still have a strong belief around something and engage in a conversation, and, at least from the very least, be able to say, okay, now I understand this person's point of view. I don't agree with it, but at least now I have a little bit more information behind why this person thinks the way that they do. Everyone's life experiences are different, and when I do these kind of public speakings, and I'm usually the first or only person in that panel that looks like me, and I tell people I am not the spokesperson for every Black single female in America or every Black single female in Edmonds. This is what my series of life experiences have brought me to be. And there might be someone who had a similar background that thinks differently than I do because they had a whole different set of circumstances growing up. So if you're able to listen to that and go, oh, okay, now I kind of get why they think that way. It's not my experience, but that doesn't mean that the experience doesn't exist. That's how we get back to civil discourse. That's how we get back to having these conversations with one another, that doesn't have to result in physical harm. But unfortunately, now we live in a time where that is happening just because someone disagreed. And it could be someone you don't even know, no one you don't have a relationship with. But there's this anger and this thing of, oh my God, you need to do it my way or the highway, that just creates such discomfort and frankly, life altering, life fearful situations. And I think about again what's happening with Julie and her team and other election teams across the country. This should not be happening because of a difference of opinion. It just shouldn't.
Absolutely, absolutely. Civil discourse is so important so that we can actually work together to really bolster our community for everyone, especially. I really appreciate that perspective. We have about 10 minutes left today, y'all. If you have any Q&A or questions for the speakers, if you could throw those in chat, I think we have time to get to one or two of those. But while folks are putting those in the chat, I would love to hear, given especially that this event is hosted by young professional organizations, what advice do you all have for young people about how you can get more involved in advocacy and beyond the elections as well?
Starts just showing up to stuff. It's really how it gets started. That's how you build, the routine of being able to do stuff like that. It's like just start by showing up and saying, no, what's going on here? I'm not even clear as to what's happening here, but let me go find out. I think the other thing too is, at City Club, I ended up starting a group called the Civically Engaged Youth Council. And it's focused on Gen Z, so like 15 to 25. And it's not even just about those that are in school, because there are Gen Zers who are not in school. They are full-time working professionals. They're trying to afford housing costs and car costs and gas and things like that. And so when we started it, one of the things that someone said to me was, oh, what are you going to tell them to do? And I said, nothing. I'm going to let them tell us what we need to be doing. Because I remember being a young Dem many moons ago. And one of the things that I was disenchanted about was that the older folks were saying, okay, this is what you guys have to do. And I'm like, but I don't want to do that,
Mm-hmm.
and like, no, we should be doing this. And so when I told people that, I was like, this is what we're going to do. So I found 4 young people from across the state that were already doing dynamic things on their own. One even started a program that's now in some of the high schools to get high schoolers to register early, but also to become precinct officers. Now, that is not something I would have thought about ever. And he was already doing it and had already connected with those in the legislature and locally to get that done. And I was just like, this is what we need to be doing. So in addition to showing up, then start telling those that are a generation or more beyond you to say, hey, this is how we think this needs to be done now. And that we have to be the ones to say, okay, we're going to sit back and let you do this. And also teach us something at the same time. So there is room for that. And I would say find people, individuals, groups, organizations that can have that same mindset and let you guys do the things, because you're already doing them to some degree. And we're so used to doing things from how we've always done them that we're not always thinking about the latest innovative or just common sense thing, because I'm still stuck in the 90s, and what we do there. So that's what I would say to do.
I would have to, as the director of elections, say vote. Because 100% turnout's the goal here. And I would just throw out some numbers. I love data, probably would be obvious as the director of elections. But in 2023 general election, only 17% turnout for the age group of 18 to 24.
Yeah.
2022 general election, 45%. 2021, 21%. 2020, 75%. So again, the total was 87%. So um, good good numbers there, but also room for improvement. So register, and I think they put the link in the chat. You can register all the way up until October 28th. And if you miss that deadline, we have same-day voter registration here in Washington State. So after October 28th, go into a vote center, still can get registered. Um, and encourage other folks to register. We'll also put in some information if you want to do a voter registration drive. We've got folks that can help you do that as well. Advocate for legislation. And I think is really a cool, important one. And run for office. And apparently, especially women need to be asked 7 times.
Yes,
Men
we
only
do.
once or twice. So run for office, 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 run for office. And we do demystifying running for office things during the springtime. Get engaged with my office. And I think there's a lot of ways in which folks can be civically engaged.
I want to tap into Ari's question about saying, my vote doesn't count because Washington usually votes blue. What was it, the public lands one that was, yeah. There's your example of it does count because there will be races at times, yeah, that, are going to be that close. Every vote does count. And again, times change and the way that people think about things change. One of the things I will say is what's been disheartening for me to see, especially, kind of in the past year or so, is this use of the word dinos and rhinos. Democrat in name only or Republican in name only. And that is starting to disenchant current and potentially future voters because they're like, if I don't think completely one way, then I'm not seen as this. Or if I don't completely think this other way, I'm not seen as that. And not being seen as an individual thinker. But I think that's starting to change. And I think the more that we go, okay, I'm still going to make sure that I vote because it does count. I think you will see a change on some level of office because people push beyond kind of this, group think all the time of it has to be, all of this or nothing. But yeah, every vote does count, and up the groves, that was intense, and I think is it still being challenged, or was someone trying to sue?
Yeah, someone sued me, but that was for a different yeah, but it's related to the recount. But you're right. It was 51 votes apart out of 2 million votes. So do not tell me that your vote doesn't matter and doesn't count. I mean, and so many people don't participate in the primary election and just assume that their candidate is going to get. And I think that's what get into the general election. I think people also assume, like, well, maybe I don't know enough to make the right decision. The right decision is what's right for you, and just taking some time to get familiarized with the candidates and the issues is just so critically important. By sitting out, sometimes what I say to groups, and I'm not sure if it's the politically correct thing to say, that's fine if you don't want to vote. I say to the young people, that 65-year-old white guy just decided for you. So, because that's who's turning out to vote. So that's that's what you're gonna get stuck with. But I would love to just hit on real quick another question I see here too about younger folks getting involved. It's newer legislation, but you can register when you're 16 years old here in Washington State now. You can vote starting at 17 if you're 17 in the primary leading up to the general election. It's not sort of just every election a 17-year-old can vote. But 16 and 17-year-olds can go ahead and get pre-registered because we know they're going to the Department of Licensing and still in high school at that time. So it's a really great opportunity to get them registered. We've got a bill that we are having in front of Olympia this session that moves Temperance and Good Citizenship Day. That's a thing in the books in Washington State, where schools have to spend dedicated time getting students registered to vote. It's in January. It makes no sense. Anywho, skis, we're asking for it to be changed to National Voter Registration Day, which is in September. So I think that that's some exciting legislation as well. And I have my second year in a row of having interns from high schools in my office helping us more engage with folks in high schools because we know getting them started early, being civically engaged is really the paramount for a long-term civic engagement. So.
And I'll just go back to what I said earlier. Just show up to stuff. You don't have to be a registered voter to show up to a meeting or to a debate or to watch it on TV. Again, when I said I put Gen Z voices, you know, significantly into the debate cycle this time around. So tomorrow we're doing the OSPI debate here in Edmonds, the Office of Public Instruction. And we actually have a young person, a 16-year-old, that's part of the moderating panel with the other adults that are going to be asking those questions about that, because that's very much is direct to what's happening right now in that young person's life, because they're in school, they're going to be impacted by the things that are coming down the pipeline. So I would say just start paying attention to stuff and showing up where you can. If you can't come to Edmonds and be there, because it is open to the public, but it's also going to be broadcast, and you can share that out on your social media and say, hey, make sure you guys are watching the debate, or did you see this snippet that the candidate said about this and that, and how do we feel about that as young people? So there is way more empowerment involved, even as a non-voting age person, by just using your social.
Absolutely. That's such a great way, I think, for us to wrap up tonight. I wish that we could continue this conversation for many more hours. It's been so insightful, and you all have shared such amazing wisdom. I have learned so many things that I didn't expect to learn while being here too. So I hope that our audience also has. I really want to highlight what you just said, Alicia, too, showing up. We really want to thank you both for showing up and sharing your wisdom with us. And we really want to invite everyone in this group to continue to show up and stay involved in this powerful work. Make sure you're registered to vote November 7th if you're eligible. It's a great way to make your voice heard, showing up to local meetings, legislators, seeing what's going on, staying informed, and check out, there will be a post-event email with all of the links and resources and upcoming events that have been shared throughout this event here today. Thank you all. We really appreciate you for showing up. And we hope that you continue to stay involved and make your voice heard.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.